something far more important than the poor behaviour of a politician that history will never remember. Let's talk about our schools. Now, our schools, of course, are where our kids are supposed to go every day to learn, but we know that the state has already shown them that they don't have to go every single day, and even told them that it was healthier for them not to go to school than go to school. But of course, they are the place where we all hope that the little people we bring into this world will end up coming out as better people and starting off in different and bigger lives, being able to achieve more than we could ever dream in our lives as parents or grandparents. And politicians know this. We know that there are people who move to certain parts of town in order to be near a good school to get a good start in life for their kids. It doesn't matter if it's state or federal, Labor or Liberal, they always turn up to talk to the kids. I'm invested in what you're doing. Well, I want to show you a class photo of the people that are currently running Australia. It was taken last night at the Lodge. Now, it's a very cosy gathering because all bar one of them are Labor, and most likely the minority government in Tasmania, well, it's kind of pretty left, it's Labor light, so essentially this is wall-to-wall Labor with Toto thrown in too. These are the people that are running our country. This is how unserious some of these people are. But the reason I want to start tonight's show is these people have direct responsibility for every single school in Australia, including independent ones because they get state funding as well. We all woke up to one story today that, again, in my view, is much more serious than the Dreyfus stuff. The OECD checks in with 15-year-olds and has for a very long period of time. Now, they have done a report, again, which they released today, which is about the state of learning and equity in education. The OECD is, of course, the Organisation for Economic Development. And generally speaking, while they're not the UN, they are across countries from Albania to Australia and many in between. And the results are yet again a disgrace. They are a disgrace to every politician who has served in our parliaments for the last 15 years. Because have a look at it. When it comes to high school kids reading, doing maths or science, Australian students have got worse every single year for the past 15 years. This is despite the fact that we have spent hundreds of billions of dollars, almost $1 trillion over that period of time, actually, of 15 years. Labor governments, Liberal governments, Gonski governments, non-Gonski governments, building education revolution governments, with multiple changes at the state level, all of them doing exactly the same thing, which is using our kids as props to get votes. But then when we actually look at the results of our education system, we are going backwards. We are going backwards at a rate of knots and have been for 15 years. Now, there's more in all of this. When you want to compare Australia in maths, reading and science to the rest of the OECD, you can see that Australia is below the average of many countries around the world in maths. The same with reading and the same with science. In fact, we learned today that Australia is now ranked 16 in the OECD in mathematics, 12th in reading and 10th in science. Now, I have never hid from the shameful truth that I was appalling at school. But I want to make sure that the school system that is educating my children, your children, or maybe your grandchildren, produces better results than what it produced for me. And I am happy to live in a country that if you are lucky enough to be paid a certain amount of money, then the government takes a certain amount of tax and it puts it into a vibrant public education system. But the reality is that despite the billions, we are going backwards. Now, you would think that on the day a report as significant as this is released, that this would become a topic of conversation because There were journalists who knew this report was coming. In fact, they knew for a couple of days. So everyone in this room knew it was coming. You reckon they talked about it with Toto over dinner at the lodge? No, of course not. Did they talk about it at National Cabinet today when every one of those people, put it up again, every one of those people who have responsibility for the country and responsibility for our kids, who are spending the billions, are in charge of a system that's going backwards and has been for 15 years. The oldest heads, the newest premiers, they've all been part of a system that has screwed our kids over. And we have fallen time after time after time for the idea that apparently the way to get better education results in this country is just to fire a cannon of money. Well, the reality is that despite the hundreds of billions of dollars, despite the fact we have spent that much money, the results are terrible. And yes, there is a certain section of kids that overperform everyone else. But there's a section of kids that once they hit the ages of their teenage years, they are going backwards. Backwards to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now 15 years ago. Yet when you had an opportunity to ask the Prime Minister, the two Chief Ministers, or all of the state premiers a question about this today, what do you think the media did? Did they ask a single question about a report that yet again shows our school system is going backwards for 15 years? No, nothing. Nothing. Nothing at dinner with Toto, nothing when they had the meeting today, no questions about it when they were together in Canberra. Now, instead, of course, the media completely fell for the announcements on the NDIS and some fiddles with some money when it comes to GST, but something as fundamental as this, for people to realise there's a problem. Now, they can't come up with a solution in a night, but I want to hear from these people that they know it's a problem. And in the same way that there is pressure on them to deliver better outcomes on the environment or the economy, that education should be part of that too. And not by telling dumb kids like me not to sit the NAPLAN tests, not to say to the dumb kids like me not to turn up when the exams will be there. Instead, we've got to make sure that we have a system that can take the brightest kid and supercharge their ability and take the slow coaches like me and bring us up to average. Part of this too is not just politicians, it's us parents. It's us as parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and friends. While none of us like the idea of having to go back and do an extra 13 years of school on top of the 13 years of school that we did, or for many older Australians, it wasn't 13 years of school, it was a lot less than that. We have to be part of our kids' education. We have to be aware of what is in the curriculum. We have to be reading to our kids at night. We have to be spending the same time we do kicking back and watching the footy or watching fail videos, working on things that help grow their brains. It also means that when we are in a position to control the devices in our houses, that we control the devices in our houses. That while it's easier to give into, Dad, can I have your phone? The answer is no. When it's easier to give into, oh, Grandma, can I just play on the iPad? No. Unless they've done their work before, unless you've seen them read a book, unless you've seen them do something to improve their education. Yet amazingly, despite how significant this story is, this is the future of our country. And think about all of the different areas where people try to use kids in protests as a way of trying to win you over emotionally. Well, these are our kids. These are our kids, and they are not being taught, or they are not learning, or they are not understanding, or they are not remembering, or they are not comprehending the basics. And we cannot have an attitude that as long as my kids are okay, everyone else's can go jump. We have to do more. I say this as a parent right now who is at maximum involvement with making sure that my kids do better. But I've got to do better as a parent. We all have to do better as the people who push our education system. Not about whether it's too woke or not woke enough. but about whether or not the basics are being covered and what we can do to help cover the basics. Now, again, this is big news. This is a big news, big report, international report that tells us our education standards for some high school kids are going backwards and have been for 15 years.